Hey, what's going on, YouTubers? It is Josh back once again with XP and PC. Hope you guys are all doing well. Sorry about the delay in making videos. It's just been a very busy transitional time for me. And if you haven't been following the channel for a while, you know I got through some eye stuff. Just finished getting through all the visual therapy, all that crap. And I'm ready to get back into the job market. Last video I mentioned I'd be getting a laptop. Trying to do some outside sales. I would need to get one of those. And I was aiming to get a Ryzen based laptop, and I did that. Matter of fact, I went and got 7 different Ryzen based laptops with the 2500U, the 2700U, and various models, everything from the one that I showed you guys that I had on order from Best Buy, which was the Dell i7375, I believe, the 2700U SKU, 13.3 inch, Ultrabook or whatever. Very nice little laptop, had a cool IR, camera with Windows Hello, convertible design, Windows Ink support or touch support at the very least, 10-point touch support, backlit keyboard, super awesome, APU, CPU with Vega 10 graphics, and 4 cores, 8 threads from AMD. However, that one arrived in a damaged condition, and I had to return it. And the other 6, well, the story with those was even the one that I got that was banged up was crashing a ton, and I credited that to probably just because it was physically damaged. Turns out that AMD, as great as they are doing, and I made a video specifically about this probably 3-4 different times, and it was just me ranting for a half an hour about how badly, how poorly, how non-existent that AMD's support for their mobile chips is at this time. Those chips were paper launched back, or supposed to launch in October of 17, and really came to market, on PCs you could buy right around the 1st of the year, January 1st, 2018, with the Envy laptop that had a 2500U, and also I think the Acer Swift 3 had a 2500U, and then they've launched just a few more systems since then. There's still only a handful of SKUs you can buy that have, AMD mobile CPUs, APUs in them. And when I went into Best Buy first to buy these, or to return the one and swap it out for another one, I was appalled. I went through the store, and there were probably 48, 50, I think it was 48 that I actually counted, but around 50 Ultrabooks, very thin, ultra low power, 15-watt TDP notebooks, whatever you want to call them, available. 2 of those included AMD CPUs. There was the ones they had on hand, I believe they had the HP 2-in-1, and they had my Dell 2-in-1 available. In 2 different configurations they had the Dell. They had it with the 2500U, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and they had it with the 2700U with 4 gigabytes more RAM. I went through all 3 of those laptops twice, and the only one that you could even load, or that you couldn't load, but it came preloaded with AMD's graphics driver software on it, was the HP. Had the version 7.7, which is like, almost a year old now in terms of the Crimson driver software, or whatever they're calling it now, Relive software. But you right click on the desktop, you have access to the control panel for your graphics hardware. You can see system information, you can adjust color gamut, you can set up by affinity, you can do all kinds of things within that software. And those drivers, that software, you are unable currently, at least to my knowledge, you're unable to install those, period. You get an error if you download any kind of software from AMD's website, the latest 18.5 or 6, whatever version that they're currently on, and try to install that. Even I went through 5-6 months back of legacy drivers. None of them would install on the Dell. Once I had redone, you know, a clean installation of Windows on the HP. None of those would install on the HP either. So it's not a system builder problem. This is an AMD problem. The lack of support that they have is absolutely appalling. So what you wind up with is basically a generic Windows 10 driver that does recognize Vega 8 or Vega 10 depending on, you know, the CPU that you have. And you can sideload force install, if you will. I think 18.1 first, and then you can on top of that you can force install 18.5 version, you know, 18.54, something like that on top of that. But when you do that, you're not getting the full set of files. You're not getting Vulkan support. You're not getting access to the control panel. And regardless, you know, if you go with the generic Windows 10 driver that's provided by the, you know, the system builders, the OEMs, Windows themselves, not the OEMs, but Windows, you know, through Windows Update or through the system builders, Dell, HP, Acer, whomever. If you use those drivers, or if you try to force install, or you do force install, basically go to that, you know, display adapter, right click, go to update driver, you know, have disk, and point right to the file for whatever version driver you want to force install. You're going to get a ton of system instability. I did enough to the point where I ended up actually going out and buying, after a month after going through 7 AMD laptops that were all great pieces of hardware, I ended up going out and getting an Intel-based laptop. And this was a 7th generation, so just a dual core, has the same graphics as the 8th generation Intel chips, the 620 graphics, which totally suck compared to the AMD, you know, integrated Vega graphics. But that's what I ended up having to do because the system instability was so horrible. You could play AAA games, but you'd try and exit the game, the whole system would, you know, turn off. You'd be just doing, you know, anything video related, which you're always doing something video related because video is always on the screen. And when you turn the computer on and the display's on, you've got chances of blue screen of death, which I haven't seen in, you know, years. That reared its head again on those systems. You'd get, you know, random restarts, just very odd. I can show you guys some pictures of just awkward, you know, video related anomalies that you would see on those systems, and it was so unstable that to realistically use those for business, even personal use, I couldn't deal with it. But to try and show a client something and not know if your system is going to crash, you know, in the middle of a presentation, isn't realistic. So I had to return that, and I got the 7th generation, just a Core i5 7200U, which is again only a dual core 4-thread CPU, which sucks. But in the graphics, you know, the Intel 620 graphics, those suck. But it was actually a couple $100 cheaper than the AMD, you know, ones I was looking at. And with regard to pricing, I thought it was hilarious that the only really you know, benefit you would get from going from an AMD-based laptop currently, you know, their Ryzen Vega parts versus Intel's 8th generation, you know, quad-core 8-thread i5 and i7 CPUs with the 620 iGPUs built into them, is really system stability. There still is some quirkiness. I've noticed with the 620 graphics. When you're playing on YouTube, you're playing on Plex, you know, you can get some weird gamma kind of in and out, which is just some awkwardness I've noticed with that display driver. But at least the system is stable. Now, both of those CPUs with only 15 watts kind of get they throttle. You know, they only have 15 watts of power available to them. So inevitably, whether you're doing something that's CPU related and you're utilizing, you know, all 4 cores, 8 threads, even just a couple of cores, a couple of threads, and then some of the graphics, especially, I found that they're just going to throttle down in terms of clock speed. So performance there really isn't bottlenecked by the architecture, the CPUs themselves. but more so by the limitations in terms of power draw. Now, the AMD chips are faster. And from what I saw, even the 2500U is faster than the 8550 from Intel. That's just with the CPU, just with respect to CPU. The graphics were, again, this is like a David and Goliath type of thing where, the 2500U, the 2700U, I'm sitting there playing The Witcher 3 on, I'm playing Doom on, albeit in OpenGL because there's no Vulkan support. I got to play multiple different AAA games, modern AAA games, no problem, and that was awesome. You couldn't play that stuff unless you want to play Candy Crush, on your brand new Intel system. And getting back to what I was talking about earlier with price, the funny thing is the only thing you gain is stability, and you're paying a premium anywhere between a 33% premium to a 100% premium over the equivalent AMD chip. So if you have an i5, the Ryzen 5, if you have an i7, the Ryzen R7, and equivalent hardware, you're paying, again, between a third more and double what you would pay for the AMD stuff. And the graphics are absolutely terrible. CPU performance was worse from what I saw, and running all my tests from Cinebench, to things like just the test in CPU-Z, and that goes for single core and multi-thread performance. It was better from AMD. I found that they were able to be more efficient and get more out of that 15 watts with respect to CPU, and certainly with respect to GPU, because Intel's solution just sucks there anyway. But even on CPU, which was very surprising to me, I thought that at least on single core stuff, the Intel stuff, would be ahead, but that just wasn't the case, at least from what I saw. So anyway, I got a cheap, Intel 7th generation laptop, and it's not bad at all. It's doesn't have any Windows Hello support, which is kind of a bummer, because the Dell that I had, I really liked having the Connect type feature where it was like, see you and kind of sign you in and know who you were. That was really cool, to me at least. But this is a cool system. It does have a backlit keyboard, has a beautiful, well, it's my beautiful girlfriend, but it has a beautiful display, 1080p display. It is touchscreen. It doesn't say it has Windows Ink support, but it does. And it is a 2-in-1, so if you want, you can get this baby to even do like a portrait mode. Yeah, you can go away. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, not a bad little laptop, but not an AMD laptop like I wanted. So AMD is planning on releasing, I guess, some new mobile chips, and these are supposed to be able to compete directly with Intel's, not their U series, the 15-watt TDP models, but also to compete in the kind of 35 to 45 watt space. And I know the U series from Intel and I think from AMD as well, both configurable up to 25 watts, but I've never seen them in those configurations. They're all stuck with 15 watts TDP. So the performance you get out of 15 watt TDP is like I just mentioned, and they're constrained by that power limitation. But with 45 watts being available, supposedly they're coming out with the Ryzen 5 2600H and the Ryzen 7 2800H. These will both still be apparently 4-core 8-thread parts, which is fine. Vega 8 again on the Ryzen 5, Vega 10 again on the Ryzen 7, which if they actually feed those things 45 watts, you're going to see a huge, basically these things are going to be unleashed. They're going to be unrestrained by power limitations. They're going to be able to really, charge full steam ahead and just absolutely, dominate in a single chip configuration to a point that Intel won't be able to match them in terms of gaming on a single piece of silicon, with integrated graphics. Now Intel will have a core advantage in the high-end, mobile space with a 6-core 12-thread part. So if you're wanting to do, things like video editing, productivity work, stuff like that, that might be the way to go. But you're basically going to be stuck with either A, crappy graphics with an integrated 620 GPU from Intel, or you're going to end up having to pull even more power and get more less battery life and spend more money with dedicated GPU as well. So if you're going to do that, I mean, in my opinion, you might as well just go ahead and buy the laptop, the Asus ROG that has ROG Republic of Gamers laptop that has the 1700 in it, the actual desktop variant of the Ryzen CPU. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads, and get yourself, I think you can get an RX 580 in there right now. But if you want the Intel stuff, you want to have the NVIDIA cards, those will be great systems, but they're going to be very, very, very pricey. To be fair, so is the Asus ROG with the 8-core, 16-thread CPU, drawing even more power, and with an RX 580. But you're talking about systems that are capable of doing productivity work and even mining if you wanted to do that. So, but yeah, I hope that these are supported better in the future. Right now, the support is non-existent. AMD, step up your shit. I mean, I had to return every single one of those, and it wasn't due, again, to the system builders. It was due to you guys not supporting your mobile platform. And I've got a friend, you guys saw I did a build video of me doing a build for a friend and gaming with that friend on 3 monitors, iFinity with a I think it's the 2400G, the desktop, APU, and it's great. They have done tremendous things with that platform. They've done a lot of updates, driver updates. You can go on there and use the full suite of software, enable iFinity, go on there and tweak, again, color, see system information. You can record, video with the application, etc. And they've supported that phenomenally well. They've supported their AM4 socket, their mainstream desktop processors, very well. They had some issues, teething issues when Ryzen first came out, and they were quick to get on that with AGISA updates, driver updates, Windows updates, and even getting with third-party developers, software developers, having them optimized for Ryzen. They have supported, as far as I know, their high-end desktop platforms very well. They've supported their server platforms very well, because there's a lot of money in those platforms. Mobile, probably not so much. But to completely neglect them is just irresponsible, in my opinion. And there's no wonder, I was mad. I thought maybe it was some kind of a, Intel partner program like NVIDIA was doing, where they were trying to, snuff AMD out of being able to offer their products in large box retailers like Best Buy. Even online, if you go online, even today, Newegg does not carry a single Ryzen-based laptop. They'll link you to somebody who does, just like Amazon will link you to somebody, but they don't actually carry it, in their own warehouses at all. And I don't blame them, because all they would get is returns, and that's not what you want. And it's not because, again, of Dell or HP or Acer. It's because AMD has not supported these chips at all, which is a shame. So I think the 2800H, 2600H, hopefully they'll be beast in terms of hardware, as is the current hardware. It was just a 15-watt TDP, but they've got to get some proper support. Otherwise, they're just going to remain complete shit, and no one's going to buy them. And if they do buy them, they're going to have the same experience I had, and they're either going to have to deal with constant crashes and instability, or they're going to return them. So that's mobile. Moving on, we got, AMD said they were going to show some cool new stuff at Computex on June 6th, and they did. This is immediately following Intel came out and said, we've got this, 28-core high-end desktop part coming out, which I will show you guys some screens. It's absolutely hilarious, the bullshit that Intel tried to pull on the press. You got all these people in the press, just being like, I can't believe it's so awesome. We're going to have a 5 gigahertz, 28-core CPU. That is not going to happen. It turns out they were using a chiller behind the scenes, and I'll show you guys some video footage. I'll show you guys some pictures of the motherboard they used, a server motherboard with an insane amount of VRMs, this massive, massive heatsink over the VRMs with fans all over it. They've got insulated, piping, just like Linus did when he did his refrigerator, kind of cooling build video or whatever, where he used basically a mini refrigerator system with a bunch of insulation and tubing and stuff like that. And he was able to achieve, I think, I want to say 6 degrees below ambient, something like that, with a very dangerous looking, huge, expensive, albeit homemade, chiller. I've seen some other chillers, even the one that Anantech or whatever it is, Anantech got their hands on, or at least got to see what Intel was actually using in terms of the chiller, and those things are hilarious. I'll show you some footage of one running. You can hear it. It sounds like a freight train. It probably weighs more than your PC. So that thing was way, way, way behind the scenes. But basically, they might as well have been running LN2 on that chip. So a massive, massive overclock, and not what you are going to see when you actually get that product. And Intel, I don't know if they are going. A couple of people have said, they're going to glue together some 14-core chips, which is hilarious because they're talking shit about AMD gluing chips together. But the fact of the matter is Intel's 10nm process sucks. It has terrible yields. They're trying to sell, the only chip they're trying to sell so far has been thrown into the i3 category. It can't even make the i5 status. It's basically such, these chips are so flawed, all they can get working on them is 2 cores and 4 threads, and these are the best yields they've gotten, and they're selling these things for basically very cheap prices because they suck. They can't achieve the clock speeds of even the last generation chips with similar, 2 cores, 4 threads. The integrated GPUs are totally disabled because they don't work probably, and Intel will not be getting that smaller node advantage to put into their next generation high-end desktop parts, etc. They're going to be stuck using 14nm plus technology, which, to be fair, I think is still very, very competitive, if not even slightly ahead of Global Foundries or AMD's currently used 12nm process. So I don't know if they're going to glue something together, two 14-core chips, which is be hysterical in my opinion, or if they are going to offer a 28-core monolithic CPU. They're going to have terrible, terrible yields with those. You're going to have a lot of SKUs down the product line with, 24 cores, 20 cores, 16 cores, whatever, because of just manufacturing defects. And the ones that do have 28 cores will end up being a super, super expensive $5,000 chip that won't hit anywhere near 5 gigahertz unless you got it under LN2 or a chiller. So that was total bullshit. But good luck to those guys. I'd love to see that, but it's not going to happen. AMD did come out after that and show off something more realistic. They didn't make any mention of clock speed. They didn't do any kind of, overclocking demonstrations and then telling people that's what they were actually going to get, which again was hysterical. But they did show ThreadRipper 2X, using 12nm Zen Plus technology, and those are going to ship apparently fully enabled, just like the server chips do now, with the the 4 Zeppelin dies enabled, not just 2 of them. So you'll have up to 32 cores and 64 threads on socket TR4 high-end desktop, which that's going to have ECC memory. You're talking about you're talking about having a server in your home. In a consumer product, you're going to have 32 cores, 64 threads, not 5 gigahertz, unless again you put it under some kind of sub-zero cooling solution on either one of those, Intel or AMD. but that's going to have basically, server level components in your home, and for stuff that requires a lot of computational resources, that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Now, moving on to the server space, AMD previously said, we're going to have Starship with up to 48 cores, and now they're saying they're going to have up to 64 cores, 128 threads. They're going to skip over 12 nanometer. They're going to skip over Zen Plus. They won't be launching their new server CPUs until Q1 2019, which is probably when you'll see the 7 nanometer Zen 2, AM4 CPUs as well. But those are supposed to have up to 64 cores and 128 threads now on a single chip. And they've got 6-channel memory, control, a ton of memory bandwidth, up to a 2-socket, on those motherboards. So you're talking about a, in a single U or a single rack space server from AMD in Q1 2019, you're going to have, let's see, 128 physical cores and 256 logical cores in a single rack, which you talk about compute density a lot in the, the hell is that? The data center. People talk about, compute density. We want to have as much power and as much efficiency, but really they just want as much as they can possibly get in terms of I/O, compute performance, etc. And that is just absolutely massive, especially considering that the vast majority of the market does use 2 sockets as opposed to, I know Intel offers something up to like, I think 4 sockets or 6 or even 8 socket, in a 1 or 2U, blade is what they call those in the server, on a server rack. But that's a very, very small percentage of the market. And with, again, as many cores and threads as AMD is throwing into a 2-socket, single U slot in a server rack, Intel is going to be very, 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 very hard pressed, especially if they cannot get 10 nanometer right, which right now it looks like 10 nanometer is, you guys have seen that poop emoji on your phone? That's exactly what 10 nanometer looks like. It looks like the poop emoji right now. And Intel, if they don't get that right, they're going to be in a boatload of trouble. They're already having to resort, it looks like at least, to calling names about people gluing stuff together, and here they are in a position where they may have to do that. They can only stick on 14 nanometer as all they have, and if they don't want to fall behind in terms of core count, they're going to have to use glue. And even with glue, it's going to be a rough road ahead for Intel, at least compared to what AMD is saying they're going to have available. Apparently these 7 nanometer chips are already sampling or will be sampling in the back half of this year, and that goes for AM4 desktop parts as well as server CPUs. So I'm very excited, guys, to see what AMD and Intel bring to the table here. I do think it's really cool that Intel has got the even though it's just basically a really well binned 8700K, the i7 8086K, which if you guys know kind of CPU history, the 8086 was the first time that kind of nomenclature was used, and the term or the acronym or nomenclature or naming scheme, whatever you want to call it, x86 for current IBM compatible really isn't a proper terminology for it, but that's what we all say. But PC hardware is x86 compatible. Everyone says x86 compatible. That's where that kind of stems from, because after that they had the the 286 processors, the 386 processors, the 486 processors, and then everything went to Pentium and then the Core series, etc. But that's where that naming scheme comes from. And I think it's cool that they're kind of giving just a nod of the hat to what at the time was really kind of brought in the era of 16-bit computing, and you know, we've just have gone up and up and up from there, and it's been a great ride. I've been around the entire time, longer even than my screensaver is set for, so to watch the show. But that will have a 5 gigahertz boost, which is great. You know, if you're doing you know, lightly threaded applications, that's killer out of the box. You know, should do 5 gigahertz boost on a single thread. And you know, we'll see if AMD, I mentioned last video again, if AMD is holding anything back, if they're currently working on some nicely binned chips of their own, if they will release a 2800X for AM4 that maybe has, I think the 2700X does 4.35 gigahertz boost, but that Precision Boost 2.0 has a really nice curve, and you can really get that thing on the stock cooler even to do 4 gigahertz on, you know, 8 physical cores and 16 logical cores. 4 gigahertz, it'll do that all day long, and then, you know, on a couple of cores, or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 cores, get up there to 4.2, 4.3, 4.35. But if they'll have a 2800X that gets to 4.5 gigahertz, again with that really nice, you know, profile in terms of you know, the frequency curve, is yet to be seen. So either way, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be highly competitive in the desktop space going forward. And you know, I don't care if you're an Intel fan or an AMD fan or not. This is great for everybody. Having these two companies take the gloves off and just go fisticuffs is awesome. It brings us a lot more power and for a lot less money. So I'm hoping that you know, every other component aspect of the CPUs of PCs rather kind of follow the trend of CPUs and get really competitive. I wish that mining wasn't such a big thing right now. It's funny because everyone is kind of trashing cryptocurrencies right now, and the prices of GPUs have come down considerably, but we haven't seen any new, you know, GPU technology for over a year now. AMD is talking about putting, you know, Vega on 7 nanometer and getting that out the door pretty soon, so better efficiency, higher clocks, etc. NVIDIA keeps saying, you know, they keep teasing we're going to show something new in terms of GPUs soon, but you know, I imagine those will be you know, highly inflated in terms of price. RAM prices, you know, you got people trying to sue the 3 big manufacturers right now who make RAM. It's out of control, and to get a high quality or even a decent PC, especially if you want to game on it, is just a very, very expensive endeavor right now. I do think it's really cool that we're finally getting, even though they're expensive as shit, we're finally getting some next generation monitors. A long time, you know, they've been lagging behind TVs, in my opinion. You know, things like we've had 4K resolution, but we haven't had HDR on monitors, at least not very you know, not very many options in terms of HDR monitors, and those are coming around. Things like you know, full local array dimming, OLED, things that enable true HDR coming around. Things like you know, higher refresh rates at higher resolutions, such as 4K, are coming around. Things like, you know, FreeSync and G-Sync on larger displays are coming around. So that's really cool. I also think it's really cool that we've actually seen proof now. I mentioned in the last video as well that it might be possible to push out certain features like FreeSync, features that are really kind of, I don't want to say developed for or stuck to, but they're part of the HDMI 2.1 spec, such as adaptive or variable refresh rate technology like FreeSync or G-Sync. But the Samsung QLED monitors, apparently, that have HDMI 2.0 ports are going to receive an update very soon that lets those TVs actually utilize FreeSync. So if you're an Xbox One S owner or an Xbox One X owner, that's fantastic news. You're going to be able to have butter smooth, you know, 0 frame tearing, 0 input lag gameplay in your living room, And again, I talk about it all the time. I keep telling you guys I'm going to do a video about the Xbox One X. And that's why I'm doing this video now about some PC stuff, because E3 is coming up here very soon, as you guys know, in a few days. And I'm sure I'll have a lot of Xbox One X stuff I want to talk about. But, the Xbox One X is undeniable right now in terms of value. If you just want a game, you can't build a PC. You can't sit there like Microsoft does and buy millions and millions and millions and millions of the same parts and subsidize your cost, not charge yourself for the operating system that you guys make, etc., and put out a box for $500. $450 will be the sale price of that system. And to get that kind of graphical fidelity, forget frame rate, but to get the kind of graphical fidelity, high resolution textures, resolution, just graphical features you can turn on and enable with a 6 teraflop, set piece of hardware developers can really hone in and tweak for, is not possible right now with a PC. You might be able to build a PC that can play at those settings, high ultra settings at 1080p, a quarter of the resolution, but you're not going to get anywhere near 4K, which the Xbox One X does, especially first-party titles. You look at Gears of War 4, you're looking at basically maxed out ultra PC settings with high-res textures at native 4K. All the first-party titles, for that matter, I think are native 4K. Forza Horizon 3 looks freaking unbelievable. Has 4K and 4X MSAA enabled, is nuts. But that's what that memory bandwidth, extra memory. I did a video a while back on the history of PS 2, 3, and 4. PlayStation basically versus Xbox, and the huge disparity between the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X is really the biggest disparity I've seen since the original PlayStation 2 and Xbox consoles back in like 2001. So it's yet to be seen whether Sony or Microsoft will release a new console in 2019, but I'm guessing more in 2020. We'll start to see the cost of those 7nm chips come down, and I can't wait for those refreshes to come out, because we're going to have even more power. You'll be guaranteed to get 4K resolution. You'll be guaranteed to get a much better CPU to provide hopefully what will be a locked 60 frames a second, if not even greater than that. And they'll both have hopefully what Microsoft has now at the Xbox One S and the X, where they'll have variable refresh rate technology in the box. So even if you have frame dips, you won't be penalized for it. But hopefully more manufacturers, other than Samsung, will push those updates out. I hope that Vizio, the TV that I have, gets a FreeSync update so I can use that with the Xbox One X that I've got. But yeah, that is me Tek'n shit for today, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Catch you guys next time, and peace out.